4 women would be killed between the years of 1976 and 1977. Patricia McQueen, Eva Dvorak, Melissa Rehoric, and Barbara McLean. So let's talk about the first victims. The first 2 murders were actually friends and students in grades 8 and 9 who attended the Easel Bazalgette Junior High School in Calgary. And Patricia McQueen resided at 2220 37th Street Southeast in the Forest Heights area, while her friend Eva lived at 3131 30 Avenue Southeast in Dover. And they would be last seen hitchhiking. Don't hitchhike, please. At 12th Street and 9th Avenue Southeast on February 12th, 1976. And the girls were supposedly told to leave the premises after being found drinking and obviously being underage at the time. They then were seen as well out partying for the next few days, taking different drugs such as LSD, weed, and drinking alcohol as well. And a neighbor then saw them hitchhiking and they were offered a ride, which thankfully, they declined. But after this, they completely disappeared, and there was no trace of them ever being alive after this. And it wouldn't be until February 15th, about 3 days after, when their bodies were found under an overpass, unfortunately named Happy Valley. And an autopsy would reveal that they died from asphyxiation and clear signs of SA, although there were no marks on their necks to indicate asphyxiation in the way of choking. And the autopsy would also conclude that the drugs in their system were not the cause of their deaths either. And the clothes and the positions the bodies were found in suggested that the bodies were just dumped and left. And whatever happened to them did not occur in Happy Valley. And unfortunately, this is where this particular case would run cold, and no answers and no suspects would be found for decades. And the next victim of the Calgary serial killer was Melissa Rehoric, who was a 20-year-old woman originally from Windsor, Ontario, and later moved to Calgary in 1976, hoping to find more work. And she would eventually find a job as a housekeeper at a hotel and lived at the YMCA, as money was tight. And this would unfortunately lead to her death, as one of her hobbies was spending time outdoors. And since money was tight, she also decided to hitchhike. Don't hitchhike out west to enjoy some hiking in the mountains for the weekend on September 15th, 1976. And she would be last seen by her roommate at the YMCA, supposedly around 9:30 p.m. However, a Calgary transit driver reported that he may have dropped Melissa off near Highway 1 in the Bowness area. Strangely enough, right next to Happy Valley, where the other 2 girls were found. And the next morning, September 16th, 1976, a body would be found in a ditch about 22 kilometers outside the city on a gravel road at around 10:50 a.m. near the Trans-Canada Highway. And she would be found fully clothed and had all of her possessions, including her cash. And the autopsy revealed that there had been a struggle with damage to her head specifically. There were also signs of SA, and the cause of death was also asphyxiation, just like the other 2 victims. However, found in her hand were long black hairs that weren't hers, because assuming during the struggle she probably was fighting and she pulled the hairs out of the killer's head and held on to them after she died. But with limited technology at the time, the culprit could not be identified yet. Which brings us to our 4th and final victim, Barbara McLean. So the supposed last victim of the Calgary serial killer was Barbara McLean, who was 19 years old and was employed at a bank and was originally from Nova Scotia. And 6 months later, she would be killed by this mysterious serial killer. An overly social and free-spirited soul, she would often go out with her friends to local bars. And living with her boyfriend at the time, she and her partner decided to go to Highlander Bar and meet up with some friends on February 25th, 1977. And according to witnesses, she was highly intoxicated this night and actually had a fight with her boyfriend, which eventually led to him being evicted from the bar. And she would continue without him and continue partying with her friends till about 2:30 a.m. when the bar closed. And she would then reunite with her boyfriend in their car, where the argument developed and led her to get out of the car, being left behind by her stupid boyfriend in the parking lot alone at night. And being extremely intoxicated, she had no other way to get home except for hitchhiking, because Uber and I guess taxis weren't really a thing. I don't know. I mean, I know that Uber wasn't around, but I'm assuming this area probably just didn't have a lot of taxis at the time. And her plan was to go to another party to keep the buzz going. I mean, she was 19, so I understand. I was never much of a party animal, but she would unfortunately never arrive at that next party spot. So as the next morning started, she was nowhere to be seen. However, she would then be discovered by a passerby who was walking his dog, finding her body on a Calgary road right outside the Calgary city limits. She was reported fully clothed, clothed, again, with all of her belongings. However, her jacket was inside out, and she had obvious markings on her body from bruises and more. And no signs of SA were mentioned in the early reports until there was seminal fluid that was recovered at the crime scene later on. But again, no suspects were ever found until decades later. As technology would evolve, they would finally develop and reopen the case to catch the Calgary serial killer. And multiple more disappearances and murders would happen over the years in Calgary. However, it wasn't until very recently that some of these would actually be solved and be linked to a man named Gary Allen Srieri. So let's talk about this piece of shit and how technically this case wasn't officially solved. So Gary Allen Srieri, if I'm saying your name wrong, I don't give a because you're a piece of shit, was a man with a criminal record, let's just say that. He was born in 1942 in Oak Park, Illinois, and he truly was a criminal at heart, with theft and evolved into charged convict after being arrested in Los Angeles for brutal SA grape, sodomy, and kidnapping. Just like, he really ticked him off really quick, just all the bad things, except for murder, yet. And he would then serve his time in San Quentin prison and was released. But the crimes obviously did not stop there. In 1974, for example, he was posted for bail for yet another grape charge in California, escaping the United States to avoid responsibility. Look at this piece of shit. He looks like he just looks like it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? He's got one of those faces just... I tell you what. And his time in Canada was chock full of more crimes. Illegally coming into the country and living under multiple aliases to hide from the law. And these names ranged from Willie Long, Rex Long, and William Rex Long. I guess this guy really liked T-Rexes or something. I don't really know. I don't know. Maybe he's got like really short arms or something. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. Just... But he would then spend most of his time working menial jobs under these aliases, usually for like under the table cash, as to not have his name or names linked to anything. And he would spend most of his time in Alberta and British Columbia, shout out to British Columbia, between 1976 and 2003. And he would change his vehicles and disguises frequently so as to not raise suspicion. So between 1976 and 1977, when the 4 murders took place, he was frequently evading the law thanks to the lack of technology for forensics, and also changing disguises and more, like we talked about. He would also continually move around constantly as to evade the law, making it extremely hard for the police to nail him down. And there are questions from authorities if he truly was the one responsible for the 4, but it's unclear. The force never truly closed the cases, reopening them frequently and exchanging notes between precincts. And in the 1990s, they would reopen the cases to investigate the DNA traces left behind at the scenes of the crime. And in 2003, they created a DNA profile for this unknown man to hopefully find more evidence in the future. And what they were able to find was a link between Melissa and Barbara, and it would be found that they were murdered by the same person. And thankfully, the case would finally actually be solved due to the evolution of the DNA technology, and the case would be reopened in 2023. And these connections finally linked to the culprit, Gary Allen Srieri, who was completely off the radar for the initial investigation. But thanks to the help of the US, the cross-reference databases had matched. However, and this is where he wasn't technically caught, died. The mother died before he could have got caught. And he died in 2011. So it was like 12 years after when he got caught. So just bullshit. And it is very unsure if those were the only crimes or murders that he committed in Canada. I'm going to safely assume he's murdered a lot more people, because his history just speaks for itself. And there's no doubt, as more investigations are reopened, the families of the victims can finally be given closure, knowing that the deaths of their families had been solved. At least we have that. At least we have closure for the families. But Gary is truly looking up at us from down below. Just flaming, just boiling and burning and broiling in hell. And this is the victims' families' responses to the solved murders. Quote unquote, saying, "We would like to thank from the bottom of our hearts the team of individuals who worked so many days and countless hours on solving this cold case. Without them, we would still not know today what happened to our sister Patsy, Patricia, and her friend Eva. We will forever be grateful and thankful that they never gave up on our girls," said the McQueen family in a statement. And the Dvork's family said that they are thankful for the closure they have been given as well, saying saying quote unquote. Eva was loved and cherished by her family and all who knew her. Her bright smile and bubbly personality was contagious and lit up any room. When Eva was around, there was no sitting still, always dancing and singing any time of the day. She enjoyed spending time with her sisters and cousins while swimming, roller skating, and ice skating. And from